beyond the trading and beyond the payment, we also want to support a lot of decentralized innovation. And that requires decentralized infrastructure that can actually bring value to the apps which are building it, and then have an economy where the revenue that is being created is not being centralized into few big tech companies, but is actually being decentralized.
Hey everyone, quick disclaimer before we get into today's episode. Nothing said on Bell Curve is a recommendation to buy or sell securities or tokens. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and the views expressed by anyone on the show are solely our opinions, not financial advice. Our guests and I may hold positions in the companies, funds, or projects discussed. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Bell Curve. Today I'm joined by Pranav Raval of Aptos fame. Pranav, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Yeah, excellent. So we've got a lot of ground to cover today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the infrastructure that your title is head of infrastructure at Aptos Labs, but you are also leading all things Shelby, which is this exciting joint venture that you've been doing with Jump. So I want to get all into that, but maybe even before we get into the weeds of what you're building, and we're going to pick it apart layer by layer. I would love to just understand, maybe zoom out for a second and understand how you were looking at the L1 landscape today. Because when you look out at the world, in a lot of ways for L1s, this is a great time. You've got a whole bunch of institutional interests in the United States. We've got the political and regulatory regimes changing. You see a whole bunch of new assets and attention and all that stuff. But at the same time, the L1 space, there's always been a lot of investment. There are many different L1s out there, and you're starting to see maybe the beginnings of some network effects taking off. And I just want to understand, how does an L1 like Aptos today think about positioning? What markets are you interested in? Talk to me about how you just see the whole landscape.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is a super exciting time to be building an L1, and especially L1 that is ready for real world demand, right? So since very beginning, like Aptos started at Meta, right? Our origins were with the DM Libra project, and the goal was to build an L1 that can scale for the global user base. So we have been building for this demand for quite some time, and we are super excited that finally we have regulatory clarity. There are lots of new and interesting use cases being built, and Aptos itself is extremely focused on building um, uh, the global trading engine. That's our goal. Avery Ching, our CEO, he put out a big vision statement at the beginning of the year, and we have been head down building the global trading engine that is going to bring all sorts of assets on chain and make the trading infrastructure 24/7 with many new innovative assets coming on chain. So that is number one. That is our big priority, and we are head down building that. At the same time, the stable coin and payments is absolutely a critical use case that is gaining a lot of traction and momentum. And at DM Libra, that was our beginning. That was, again, that is what we were born to build. And you can see there is a lot of stable coin inflow. There's stable coins, both two big names, USDC and USDT, and bunch of and other stable coins are already on Aptos. And so we are also very well positioned to have um, very high throughput payment networks being built on Aptos. So those are the two key stated objectives. And the third one, which probably will go in a lot of details today, is build a global decentralized infrastructure layer that can compete or even be better on some dimensions with current centralized clouds. Because beyond the trading and beyond the payment, we also want to support a lot of decentralized innovation. And that requires decentralized infrastructure that can actually bring value to the apps which are building it, and then have an economy where the revenue that is being created is not being centralized into few big tech companies, but is actually being decentralized. So the third big initiative we have is we build the decentralized infrastructure that is high performance and can operate at a scale that all the big tech companies operate at.
Got it. Yeah, and that makes so much sense. Just given your past at Meta, right? I mean, everything in Web 2, some of these massive, tech giants do everything, very famously to scale, and I think that kind of stands out with the vision here. And we were talking a little bit before we got on the call of, and this will lead into Shelby and why it's interesting. But kind of this vision of combining some aspects of what have historically been relegated to the realms of kind of Wall Street, finance, financing, capital formation, but then also what has been kind of relegated to Silicon Valley, which is value creation and creating a product that people really love. And I remember in when I was getting into crypto in 2017, 2018, people had all these debates: is it Silicon Valley or is it Wall Street? And our discussion before we got on just made me laugh because those two things are actually highly related. So maybe could you talk a little bit about kind of this vision around combining or putting much more closely together the financing and the value creation aspect on chain.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. All right. So let's talk about the Shelby economy flywheel that we are building, and the purpose why we are building Shelby. So if you look at Web3 and the state of the union right now, we have nailed the digital currency use case where we started with BTC and now we have Bitcoin, now we have stables. We also nailed the tokenized assets from meme coin to RWAs. But when you really think about it, when you squint hard, this is actually all about value exchange. In fact, even if you want to be a little bit critical, there is also a lot about value extraction with MEV and arbitrage and everything, right?
Mm.
So yes, while we want to build an amazing value exchange engine, because the participation in exchanging value also brings a lot of economic benefit to everybody globally. Um, we want to also add a slightly different counterpart to that, which shall be we want to have decentralized hot storage tier where you can store, serve, and process data at scale. And once you put compute next to Shelby, you can analyze, train, and infer from that data. So your data gets converted to information, your data gets converted to intelligence. With that intelligence and information, uh, the D apps that you can build on top of it would be rivaling in revenue the applications we see already that is being built. You can have streaming, you can have ads, you can have social applications because now it's all backed and powered by data. The same engine that powers all the big tech revenue will be now available to everybody in the decentralized economy. And so this is the value creation engine. So when you put the value creation engine next to value exchange engine, I would want you to think about a D app that is building decentralized streaming with user generated content, say YouTube, decentralized YouTube. That could now actually have tens of millions of users and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. When that now asset gets listed on the trading engine, it generates capital that mirrors the IPO or large scale IPOs that we have seen generate already. And that capital that is raised kind of gets invested back into decentralized innovation. And so this is the decentralized digital economy flywheel that we are looking to create, which shall be, and that is the end game, right, for decentralized digital economy. And so that primarily motivates us to build the missing piece of infrastructures in the digital economy, decentralized digital economy.
Mm. Okay, so I have a lot to say about that, but before we get into the details, can you just describe how does the Shelby product enable something like a decentralized YouTube? Like just talk just for actually for folks who are less technically inclined, just give us an overview of what storage is, right? Why, the kind of tagline of how Shelby is described as this, hot storage network. So why is it so important to put, this on chain, right? How does this enable what you're describing?
Yes, totally. I think the key fundamental premise that Shelby brings is incentivize reads. So when you store your data in a decentralized way, anybody who now wants to access the data, they need to pay for that data, right?
Mm.
So this does two things. One is that your data is being served really really fast because the reads have to be paid for, and all the participants in the network are now incentivized to serve out the data as fast as possible. And the
Mm.
second thing is that it also kind of brings the data that is worth paying for, right? So that brings high value data in the decentralized storage. So if you look at the current state of the affairs for all the decentralized storage systems that are existing right now, there is a lot of data that is just kind of backup and cold storage and archival. So now users who are building, or there's a D app that is building a YouTube like streaming application, they can start incentivizing their users to say, hey, put your content here. When we serve out the data, you are going to get paid. Then we are, then at the same time, the data and the analytics that can be processed and can be understood from the data will also allow the DApps to start having ads marketplaces. So we are already talking to some decentralized ad marketplaces that can help bring the content and the relevant ads together.
Mm,
And so now the DApps that is building its own revenue stream. The users which are bringing their videos on decentralized storage, they are also building, they are also making money. And so every all the participants, so unlike a big tech, like if you think about the take rate for YouTube, there is about 45 to 50%. um, uh, any streaming platform takes 45 to 50% take rate, versus in the new economy, the take rate could be much lower.
mm,
A lot of the revenue can be passed on to the users, and the DApps and the users and all the participants start participating and start getting getting a big slice of the revenue that is being generated.
mm. Okay, so with that in mind, so I think also that there's something to be said for, I mean, just like if you go back and look at the web and all of the different successive layers of computing that needed to evolve in order to make it happen, even something like YouTube, right? Which, by the way, fun history about YouTube. That was actually first basically an early predecessor for like Hinge or Tinder,
Mhm.
before they pivoted to YouTube, the YouTube that we all know today. And it took quite a long time for them to actually become profitable and to decipher a business model. But also, think about all the different, like the bandwidth constraints that needed to happen, all the different stuff that you could do on a web app, social algorithms first instead of, looking at videos that your friends like. There were so many different things that needed to happen. And these kind of successive waves of infrastructure that we all today take for granted. And so, what I want to dig into now is like, help me understand exactly the architecture of Shelby, and then we can get into maybe even getting a little bit more concrete in terms of how it enables this
Yeah,
vision.
totally. I think even going back to when you talk about history of YouTube, even talking about history of internet, like 1998, where Google was incorporated, I believe they collected or they indexed about 25 to 50 million web pages, and they put page rank algorithm on top of it. And since that, like trillions of dollars of revenue has been made from data and algorithms, right? And so I think this is where, if you want to start making something like YouTube more successful, or more like decentralized YouTube more successful, you need you need an engine that can allow you to process all of this data, run your algorithms on it, build kind of user centric feed and recommendation, and then kind of match the ads and users in a way that is still privacy preserving, because you don't, now that data is owned by the users, users can allow access, and users can selectively kind of share certain parameters that they want to use for the kind of ads they want to see, right? So I think there is a lot more that is going to happen in a decentralized economy that looks similar on the surface, but behind the scenes, underneath, it gives a lot of power back to the users. So now coming to the architecture, Shelby architecture, there are six pillars of Shelby architecture that differentiate its Shelby from the general decentralized storage that is there right now. And let me bring that slide. So let's talk about the six pillars. So first, as I mentioned, the paid reads. Um, Shelby incentivizes every single read. So data that is stored in Shelby, every time you try to read the data, you have to pay for it. And we have special payment channels being built so that there is no impact of making that payment on the performance of the read. Right. So where your data reads would be seamless. The second one is a dedicated network. Again, this is a foundational change from how everything is being built. Every infrastructure is being built in uh, in all the other storage networks, because they all go through public internet and they're extremely bandwidth constrained. For Shelby, we are going to use a dedicated fiber network with very high bandwidth. So all the nodes that participate in Shelby network, they'll all be connected through probably 100 Gbps network to begin with, and probably a terabit network soon after. So this way, all the nodes in Shelby network will be able to move a lot of data around super fast. Um, the third one is battle tested software, and jokingly, Jump and Aptos team talked about how long it took them the last time in Meta and Jump when we put out a new hot storage protocol. And in Meta, it took us like a couple of years, and similar for Jump. And so we, rather than kind of inventing everything from scratch, we are going to use some of the battle tested software from Jump's existing stack. Right. So that allows us to go to market really, really fast. And it brings the reliability and performance that is required at scale. Whenever you build a decentralized storage system, um, you have to figure out how you are going to take your data, split it into many, many chunks, and spread it across the network. And you do that so that your system is resistant to failure. Right. If some nodes fail, some disks fail, even a rack fails, and all of this is very common at scale, you do not lose your data. Um, at the same time, you really have to find the right balance of repair bandwidth and kind of your robustness of your data. You can overly replicate the data many, many ways, or you can have very small amount of replication and then you end up paying a lot of repair bandwidth. And so we are using an encoding scheme called clay codes, which gives us this optimum kind of balance between those two. In a decentralized storage system, you also need to make sure that your data is available, because this is not, you're not putting it in your kind of one data center and just make sure that you're watching your machines. Like it's running globally all across many, many different data centers. And so then auditing scheme needs to be extremely efficient for, and it also needs to be incentive compatible. So you have to constantly audit to make sure that the file that all the nodes are saying they have stored actually exists. Otherwise, you run the risk that there is a node that says the file exists and they have it. When you ask them for a proof, they'll actually go to another node and say, "Hey, give me that file. I'll give you the pass on the proof, and I'll just reap the benefits." So we have a very interesting auditing scheme that prevents from all of that from happening, while it is extremely efficient. And of course, definitely, you need an extremely fast, reliable, and scalable coordination layer, because when you're building a highly scalable storage system, there are many, many files. You need to keep track of everything. You need to keep track of all the payments, and you need to keep track of all their auditing results and placement. And this is where Aptos shines through, right? You asked me about the beginning, like what is Aptos thinking about? Because Aptos is highly scalable and highly performant, Aptos can support um, a workload of this scale seamlessly, and also our gas costs are very cheap, right? So it does not add to the cost of the storage protocol itself.
So, are you thinking about Aptos and Pranav as, this is one question that I had for you, in preparing for this episode is, is Shelby kind of what is the relationship exactly with Aptos? Like, is this exclusively kind of another layer of infrastructure which is going to live kind of permanently and exclusively, within Aptos, the protocol? If this was successful enough, as a hot storage layer for Aptos, would you serve other L1s? Like, how do you view the positioning
That's
here?
an excellent question. So while Shelby is being coordinated on Aptos, which means all your files that you're storing will be managed and coordinated on Aptos, the usage of Shelby is already built for any chain and any stack. We also want to break away from the silos that we have created in like, or maybe even the cults that we have created, right? That you just kind of go all in on that only single stack. Shelby should be able to serve any stack. We already have multiple L1s who have partnered with us. Story Protocol is going to be using Shelby. Near and Shelby announced a partnership, and we are talking to two or three other L1s and L2s to bring their data heavy workloads and data heavy DApps that they are building on Shelby. And so Aptos will be the coordination layer, which should be seamless and kind of somewhat hidden from all the consumers of Shelby, which want to kind of read and write data from Shelby.
Mm, okay. And Pranav, help me understand too. I'm just thinking of, let's say I'm trying to build the next YouTube, right? Or let's even say there are all of these workloads that are happening right now. There are lots of like exchanges, maybe are a good example, where they're hybrid on-chain, off-chain. And many of the workloads just happen mostly in an off-chain environment where computation is cheaper. And then maybe you post something like a proof on chain, right? Like
Mhm.
that's kind of the way, tell me if I'm misunderstanding this, but the way that I view this is you're moving more of the workload, especially on the memory side of things, on chain, right? And Aptos is extremely, this is a really great use case for Aptos in the sense of it's very fast, it's very cheap, and it can accommodate those additional workloads. But what is the benefit from the perspective of an app builder here, say?
Yeah, so the biggest benefit that I see is that your data becomes integrated with your on-chain workflows. So you are not bringing the large data on-chain, but there is a very seamless integration. I'll give you an example of how this all plays out. There is a one very large Hollywood studio which is very interested in building decentralized streaming platform on Shelby. And I was also a bit surprised when I first heard this requirement. And yes, there are these monopolies and middlemen and all of that that is actually a problem. One thing I realized that when you think about any content, you have lots of contracts which talk about royalties and IP and rights. And so there is on one hand you have rights, then you have content, and then you have royalties, and then how everything pays out and how everything there is a waterfall of payment that you need to manage.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
every step of the way is a different system right now. And when you bring it all together, including the streaming and including the payment for streaming, you can automate that entire workflow. Right? You stream the data out, you get the payment for that stream data out, that payment automatically then goes on chain and says, here's my smart contract, here's the waterfall of payment, this is how everything should get paid out, and everything settles like somewhat real time, versus right now it takes months and months to settle those accounts, right? So this whole efficiency of seamless integration from your app to your data to payments and
Mm.
everything just being coordinated seamlessly is a huge value addition for anybody who's looking to build the app, and that is a data hungry the app.
Okay, that makes a ton of, and that I can completely see the benefit of that as well. Like this is one thing that I'm just kind of trying to think through in terms of what are some of the big changes that stable coins might bring about. And yeah, if you have kind of an asset and then you've got the dollar payment, it just makes everything much easier to do
Yep.
in one
Yep.
environment. You can do things like real time streaming, right, or something like that, which would make no sense in kind of this segregated on chain and off chain environment
Yeah,
today.
and it also brings new experiences and new payment models. Like you know, you might want to do rather than like everything works on subscription right now, right? You might want to just do pay per use, and you can start having now micro payments. Even if you are watching a short clip, you can charge for it, right? And so all of the new payment rails can enable new experiences that don't exist right now, and kind of everything is either ads or subscription. So I'm also super excited about that, right? Bringing all of this on chain and enabling new payment models to enable new experiences.
Hmm. Okay, so let's go back to. I was looking at that slide, and I've got the white paper pulled up here as well. So these are kind of the architectural pillars here of paid reads, dedicated fiber network, battle tested software stack, efficient coding scheme, and incentive compatible auditing, all built on Aptos. Talk to me about this dedicated fiber network. Where is this coming from?
um, that's a that's a pretty good question. This is something that has been holding the industry back so far,
Hmm.
because everything we're building is just so bandwidth constrained, right? And so finally we have industry has realized that we need more dedicated bandwidth and a lot of it. And DoubleZero is building,
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
taking the first step. Yep, first step in this direction. And so we are also working closely with DoubleZero to have dedicated bandwidth for Shelby. And we believe this is just a start, right? These are the two foundational layers. Once you have dedicated bandwidth, and then you have high value data, then these are all the pieces that you can start stacking on top of these two foundational pillars. Next, we are going to bring compute, GPU and CPU, and then there is a in Aptos we are also building event driven architecture, um, in some sort of, you can call it reactive blockchain. So you can build a lot of workflows. So now you can have a workflow engine, you have your data, you have your compute, you have your bandwidth, and this is where you can start actually in earnest start competing with the existing cloud providers, and build a decentralized cloud.
Mm. So, how do you think about, like, when I think about the cloud providers, or even something like, maybe we could talk about, CUDA, something like CUDA built around NVIDIA. Like, part of, the lock-in that these guys have, is not just, the compute that they're able to offer very cheaply, but around all of the software that they give away for free, right? Like, you have entire, SDKs, libraries for like dedicated use cases, and that's a huge, it different people have different strategies, right? CUDA kind of gives away the software, but everything in NVIDIA is closed source, and so it locks you into the hardware. Versus, some other strategies, which is more about charging for the actual software. So, how do you think about, okay, outside of enabling this, what else are you going to need to do? Maybe selfishly from the perspective of providing lock-in for Aptos, but outside of just providing the ability to do this, like, are you investing in kind of SDKs and use cases and stuff like that to build around here? Or talk to me about that layer.
Yes, absolutely. I think what one thing you will see, and we can talk about it, is that when Shelby DevNet comes out, we are going to have a bunch of use cases and bunch of SDKs that we are building that go with each of these use cases. We are not building on compute yet, but we are going to start building compute soon next to Shelby. And that's the beauty of decentralized infrastructure, that you can also have NVIDIA hardware, and you can also have anything else. You can have your AMD hardware next to it, and you can have all of these libraries, as long as you can run in like NVIDIA also supports running supports hardware, and then they have, I think, built-in support for trusted execution environment with GPUs. And so once you have verified compute, you can leverage all the libraries which are there. They just run in a trusted context, right? So we can run that. We can offer the new other hardware. It depends on what users want to use, right? So I think we see a future where all of this can become seamlessly come online, can connect to the same network, so that their ability to process data and move data around, and kind of ingest data and process data and read and write data is pretty high. And so we can offer all of these all of the systems, and then SDKs and APIs that make development extremely simple. One of our goals with Shelby is to actually have a user go from not knowing about Shelby to building on Shelby in less than half an hour. Like, just go there, you see the example, you write it, and it's like, yep, it makes sense. Here's how read and write data. Here's how make payments. Here's everything works, and just seamlessly just start building.
Mm. Okay, so walk me through, on the architecture side, the different layers that exist here. If I'm understanding this correct, there's a client SDK, RPC node layer, storage provider, and coordination layer. So I know that's, we're in danger of getting deeply into the weeds here, but just walk me through, like, overall kind of the different layers of the stack.
Absolutely, I would love to. So then, these six pillars, we have kind of few horizontal cross-cutting layers. So client SDK is where you take the data, you split it into these chunks. Then we have RPC nodes, which act as a gateway to everything Shelby. So RPC nodes are in charge of receiving your data, making sure data gets written or read from the nodes. And RPC nodes are also kind of, they can offer new and innovative payment models. Like for example, we also see some RPC nodes can say, hey, actually, even if you want to pay for Shelby in credit cards, I'm happy to accept credit card. I don't mind
Mhm.
that, right? So of course the default would be stables, but there would be RPC nodes that can provide any kind of payment mode. And so then the last one is SP storage provider nodes, which are kind of akin to, you can think about validators on a blockchain. These are going to be storage optimized large nodes with hundreds of terabytes of storage, potentially petabyte of storage per node, globally located in data centers where we have connectivity. They will be storing data. They'll get paid for storing data. RPC node will get paid for the reads they're serving out. And client SDK makes everything very seamless and integratable in your D app. And so this is where when I mentioned that we want to go from not knowing about Shelby to building on Shelby in 30 minutes, this is where very simple, easy to use client SDK will come in play.
Got it. Okay. I really that's super interesting, the ability to pay with credit cards. That's yeah, that's something I hadn't really thought of, but that's very
Yeah,
cool.
and this is where okay, I'm going to get slightly excited, but when we look at the current pricing model of the current clouds, um, there is a storage uh, price and there is an egress price. So let's take Amazon S3 for example. Their storage is about you will pay $23 per terabyte per month, and the egress would be anywhere between. It depends on your egress monthly egress bandwidth that you buy, but anywhere is like 70 to 80 or even $90 per terabyte per month. So as you read more and more data, there's this general complaint that hey, my cloud bill suddenly adds
Yeah.
up. Like
Yeah.
everybody's just always surprised, like, oh, my cloud bill is so high. Because they're like, oh, I'm just paying $23 per terabyte per month. And then once you start using your data, your bill starts accumulating. When I started looking into what's cost that much, we realized two things. One is that the egress cost in itself is not that high. One is that they want to create this data moat and lock in, right? So data is a kind of key asset they want to lock into their own infrastructure. So, hey, why do you want to take out the data? Just use it with our engines and use it internally for other use cases. And the second thing is that there is a very high markup on egress. And so when we are looking at, and we haven't finalized the Shelby cost model yet, but even from storage point of view and egress point of view, there are opportunities to make it, while keeping the performance characteristics the same, make the cost cheaper, right? And so we are excited that we are completely expecting that there are going to be large web 2 clients who who would be very interested in using Shelby as well, just for the economic benefit that it will bring. And so that is where the whole, hell, hey, there should be a credit card payment model as well to onboard users. And this is where we feel like a lot of this mass onboarding will happen, because they will use Shelby. They'll not even realize it's being coordinated on a blockchain, and they'll be super interested, like, oh, what else does it offer, right? And so slowly we think that there will be a one more path through which we are going to onboard new users and kind of new and enterprises onto decentralized infrastructure.
Mm. And is there something about the decentralized architecture which allows you to, like, for egress to be structurally cheaper, or is that just a plan to undercut their current centralized cloud pricing models?
It's primarily that, like, if you when you're actually serving out data, there are like three major cost factors. One is that the machines that you use to serve out the data. The second thing is the internal bandwidths to move data, because it's in storage, stored somewhere. You read the data out, you bring it to the edge of the RPC node to serve it out. And the third is like you pay the ISP to buy the bandwidth to serve it out. When we put it all together and add it up, it's still significantly cheaper than what the big clouds are offering. And so yeah, that's just a very high margin on the US.
And Pranav, why walk me through the logic of why make Shelby its own layer versus, you're head of infrastructure at Aptos Labs, so why not build this into the Aptos protocol itself?
Yeah. I think it primarily goes into how L1s and blockchains work, right? So let's take an example of Aptos. It's a network of 150 nodes, and in that network, you get each node replicates all of its storage, right? Because it's fundamentally it's a ledger, and all 150 nodes need to agree on the state of the
Yeah.
ledger at any given point, right? And so the data gets replicated 150 times. So that amount of replication is only justifiable for something that is where you are storing kind of high value but small data assets, like your it's a ledger, so your accounting, for example, that should happen on chain because you need all the 150 nodes to agree on Aptos. But when you start talking about large data sets and potentially large compute, you can you can think about a blockchain or an L1 that can support it, but then you have to replicate it as many times, right? And so that just adds a cost, kind of explodes at that point, and it just becomes very expensive to operate and use. So I think just building storage layer which is adjacent to Aptos and maintaining all of its metadata on Aptos, right, to coordinate and make sure the data integrity is fine. But the actual blobs, they don't need to be on chain. The blobs can be off chain as long as you can maintain its integrity and make sure that all the metadata is preserved, it's coordinated, it's paid for. It essentially serves the same purpose without
Mm.
replicating it as many times.
And Pranav, is there a differential performance for Shelby here on applications which are built on Aptos versus, let's say, Ethereum or Solana?
No.
So I'm just thinking about, okay.
No, we expect all chains, all stacks to use Shelby seamlessly. We have Aptos as we have cross-chain accounts, so you can just use that account, and you can uh, write for it. Reads have, as I mentioned, reads have kind of many different flavors. You can directly pay the RPC nodes in the stables of your chain, and when you write you have to use the cross-chain account and write, but that should all be very seamless, from performance to kind of ease of development, everything we want to. Shelby has been designed from kind of day one to be any chain, any stack.
Hmm. So help me understand, and maybe as we start to, kind of wind down here, I almost want to, go back and forth with you a little bit on some. I have a pet idea that I really like. So I've been very into this idea of content coins and underwriting. So been in media for a long time. I see the trend, individuals over companies and brands. And there's some of these streamers. I don't know if you know a guy named Speed. Yeah, $600 million deal from Twitch. And so one of the things that I like about the idea of content coins is you get easier access to financing. Like you can just take a coin, you can dump it into a protocol. And if you actually, one of the benefits of like on-chain social would be all that information is just out there, and you could use that to underwrite a loan easily. So I'm just thinking, is this like a workload that could work in the future? Let's say in this crazy world that I'm presenting here, which very few people agree with me on, and I've talked to a lot of people about it. But let's say I am a creator and I'm on this decentralized version of like a Twitch or YouTube or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
and all of my analytics live in Shelby, right? Like my whole
Mhm.
history, the entire memory of all my videos, yada yada. So let's say I want to leverage that to go get a loan. So Aave, theoretically over on Ethereum, could leverage that data. Say, hey, this person is creating content. Their engagement is growing they have twice as much engagement and is growing at 1.5 the rate of the average creator. I know what that means that means historically in terms of cash flow, and therefore I can just do this loan. It can all just happen pretty autonomously on chain very easily. Is that the type of thing?
You might have just unlocked the missing piece that I have been thinking about, the creator economy.
Oh,
this
really?
is this is amazing. The reason, and I'll first step back and then come back to your question. Um, the creator tokens have just got a bad reputation, right? Because of a lot of people just launch creator tokens, they don't back it by anything substantial. There has been like some examples of pump and dump or rug pulls and whatnot. And so I think this one of the key audience or developer audience for us is creators. We are actually talking to some of the very big creators who are interested in participating in the new creator economy, and they're also very excited about it, but they're kind of scared of just putting a creator token, right? And so now, if the token is, you first build a history, right? You first build out your reputation on chain, your history on chain, the proof of revenue on chain, backed by all the data that is built on Shelby. You have all the analytics available, you have all the history available, and then you can launch a creator token. Now, that is very well backed by all of your data, your history, and you can have very clear terms of like what does it even mean
Mm.
to own that token. So that is the one part, and the other part is now taking it to the DeFi world and decentralized finance and getting loan against some collateral. I think that's absolutely possible as long as you can prove what, what is the value, you're putting it in as collateral. And with Shelby, that is absolutely easy to prove because all of your history and everything would be readily available for anybody to verify. So I think that's a, your question was slightly different, but that has triggered a very different thought process for me, to kind of build out a path for large creators to come on chain, on Shelby, and have a very compelling story of why they should build out this history and reputation so that they can leverage it in many different ways.
Yeah, so historically there actually are, I've thought about this actually an enormous amount, and there are, you can look at like YouTube and TikTok today that actually have these creator actually in the beginning days of YouTube they found out they actually gave loans to creators because they're like, hey, you were, they kind of found a bunch of people in the early days that were creating content, then they drop off, and they would actually go to them and say, hey, why you stop creating content? It's like, dude, I'm a barista at Starbucks. I got to work. They're like, well, if we were to give you $20,000 that get paid back from the ads that we serve on your platform, would that be interesting to you? You'll quit your job, go do this full time, kind of thing. And now I think the value prop I firmly believe the value proposition for how you're going to get creators to do this is, if you're even like a middling creator, try going to a bank and telling them applying for a mortgage while running a crypto podcast. Good luck. Even if you're making a ton of money, even if you're making a lot of money
Yep.
doing it. But if you were to do it on chain, and if you were able to, this is stolen valor because this idea actually comes to me from Jacob from Zora, who if you're able to, put the cash flows on chain very close to the coins,
Mhm.
and you're able to drive value, that's great. But having an open model where you're creating this history and track record, to get funding and a loan, and it's not siloed. That's the key. It's not siloed to TikTok or YouTube, so they have all this control over you.
Yep.
Yeah, it's super powerful.
No,
So
totally. And you can selectively give access to different people for your data. And with the new regulatory environment, I think there is just a lot of appetite to look into, how crypto is adding value and how crypto backed assets should be. I think there was a regulation that allows kind of lenders to start considering crypto assets in your mortgage application, which was missing, and all of us have kind of suffered one way or the other because of that. So
seriously.
I think this is the right time to start thinking about this. So yeah, this is a great idea, and I think we should brainstorm more after the podcast on
Yeah,
this
I
idea.
think so too. I've yeah, in case you can't tell, I've thought about this an enormous
Yeah.
amount. So you've tickled my funny bone. Pranav, this is really exciting. I'm certainly hopeful that what we've talked about here right at the end definitely gets built. But I'm sure in the interim there's going to be a lot of really interesting stuff. Maybe in closing here, could you just talk to us? If you're someone, obviously the audience for this podcast is a little bit more crypto
Mhm.
oriented. So obviously, yeah, very exciting to hear that a big Hollywood studio is building, but maybe help make it a little bit more real for, let's say I'm building a borrow lend application on Ethereum or some kind of on-chain asset management on Solana or a new launchpad. Like how could, where are some of the early traction that you're seeing with maybe more crypto native use cases, maybe to just,
Yeah,
get
I
people.
think there is a generally a need for high performance data availability layers in itself, like the ones that exist. You post your data, but they don't get read enough. So I think that's something what we are seeing. We are seeing the history of chain being stored on Shelby. There are people are reaching out. A lot of uh, also just understanding your DeFi strategies, and kind of people are trying to automate some of your trading systems. And right now, they all they have to go by is like the tip of the chain. And now there is kind of historical data. You can process it, and can build more, automate more on chain trading strategies. Um, the real big unlock I'm seeing though is actually happening in decentralized AI. And I'm super stoked about it because there are many use cases like across the spectrum. Like what I'm seeing is that um, first of all, AI data marketplaces. Like if you go to Hugging Face, you put your data there. There's no monetization model for you. You just kind of have to give it out for free. You pay like monthly subscription fee. So Hugging Face makes money, but you don't. And so we have like some creators have reached out to us and say, hey, we capture this amazing nature videography and there's so much demand, I just don't know how to monetize it, right? And so where should I put it? And say, oh, Shelby would be the ideal place, because everywhere else what you do end up doing is like you have this massive upload and download which are very slow. And so when you take the data out, then you start processing it. By the time there is a newer version on there, you have to kind of manage multiple versions. This becomes very messy. Versus Shelby, because of its performance, you can just buy and just point at it and say, hey, just start training your model using this data. So that's one area. The second one is we are seeing this agentic AI revolution, the revolution that's coming, or the promise of agentic AI. All the agents have to manage a lot of context and what's called agent memory, and then the context needs to be stored and kind of be portable from one model to another. Even when you interact, like for example, when you're interacting with
Totally.
ChatGPT, you
This
build
is
all
why
of
I'm
this
so
context.
sticky with ChatGPT. Yeah, it knows me.
Absolutely right. And so that so making that context portable is another very interesting use case. There is also MCPs and RAG based kind of augmented generation, or just something that
Hmm.
enhances your model output. You can have API based kind of payments, and then the data can be stored in a decentralized way. There's a decentralized API, and you kind of make money out of it. And then there are further advanced use cases of privacy preserving AI and decentralized AI. But I am personally super stoked about those use cases, that kind of now start coming on chain. And so it's Shelby's ability to kind of attract more use cases on chain than just only serving the crypto native use cases.
Very cool. Well, Pranav, if anyone, Web 2 or Web 3 or otherwise is listening and wants to learn more, get in touch with you, the work that you're doing at Shelby, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, go to shelby.xyz. There's also a link if you want to build anything interesting, put your idea there. And one thing I would say is we have some big announcements coming up with Aptos Experience, which is October 15th and 16th in NYC. So if you're around, if anybody's around, you're welcome to join. And there is maybe I can share the code as well. Use the code Shelby and see what kind of discount you get on your ticket. It will be worth it. Well, it will be worth checking out.
Amazing. All right. A little bit of alpha right at the end there, Pranav. We love it. Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on. And yeah, we'll have to do it again soon.
Thank you for having me. It was a great chat.
Take care.